Persian African empire that we're talking about, and it will eventually go to Eastern, what we used to call Eastern Europe as well. So the issue is you got this big empire. How do you control this? How do you manage this? The first thing that he does, or one of the earliest things that he does after he comes to power and holds the throne, is he says, well, we need roads. Just like today we have in my neighborhood 405 freeway and 101 coming up and 1 and so on to get everybody moving, including big trucks, right? That, you know, a lot of commodities are being taken from east, west, north, south. He creates what is called the Royal Road. This is our first major international endeavor in antiquity to connect, let's say, Asia all the way to the Mediterranean, and also, you might say, to Africa. That is 3 continents that we're talking about are going to get connected in an interesting way. If you can imagine these freeways, here's the 405, the 101, and so on, going on, a huge task. And in this way, it is going to try to manage this empire. Now, we know on this road, there were 111 stops. Sometimes they're called postal stops. So one of the earliest form of a postal system that you might think of them are being established here. So we know in Armenia, there were 6 stations, Herodotus tells us. And then you had to have these passports. Not everybody could get on their, you know, horses or walk through this. You needed a laissez-passer or a passport. And we do have evidence of that. That king and so-and-so administration has said that this person should be given rations and food. You should put him up in these postal stops or rest stops until the next one. Now, I may be saying that, and you say, where does he get these things? Well, there are actually texts that do tell us about this issue of the Royal Road. For example, Herodotus, our famous Greek historian, which is quite invaluable for the study of this ancient Achaemenid world. So what does he say? Nothing mortal travels so fast as these Persian messengers. The entire system is a Persian invention. Along the whole line of road, there are men stationed with horses in number equal to the number of days which the journey takes, allowing a man and, a horse to probably each day. Book 8. So Herodotus had certainly noticed this, as well as the Greeks, that they're using this in terms of making connection in order to manage this empire as such. But that is the general outline, from Indus to the Mediterranean and so on. But while these Achaemenids have also taken over Egypt, they're going to do something else that is quite novel, and we're going to see why these are important in a minute or two. This is just not for the sake of Achaemenid glory. This is the statue of Daryaee, and we know there were probably about 50 of these or more along the Nile and along what is the Suez Canal, the canal. Daryaee is going to also attempt to open the Suez Canal for the first time. And so on his relief, there is hieroglyphic as well as Old Persian inscription. It says, proclaims Daryaee the king, I am a Persian, from Persia I seized Egypt. That's not so important for our sake. I gave order to dig this canal from a river by the name Nile, which flows in Egypt to the seas that goes from Persia, the Persian Gulf. Thereupon this canal was dug exactly as I had ordered, and ships went from Egypt through this canal to Persia as I had desired. So this guy, besides being a king, is quite smart. He's thinking of creating the first international economic seaway roadway. So you would be able to go from here, the Persian Gulf, you go down to Arabian Sea, Red Sea, come up here, and then go back. And then you could, of course, get to the Mediterranean. So this road, or this sea route, is opened already in the 6th century BC. And then there are roads crisscrossing. That is the formation of the earliest economic system in the ancient world. We usually talk about world trade and so on after 1400, or sometimes 1500. Ladies and gentlemen, already in the 6th century, we have, on a lesser extent, such a system in creation. He also standardizes coinage, weight, and measure. Just think of the United States. Under the Articles of Confederation that you know much better than myself, each state mint printed its own money, had its own laws. If you wanted to trade, things would get a little bit chaotic, right? And even in terms of legal transactions. What he's doing throughout this entire region is saying, okay, here is the Daryaee. This is the gold coin that is worth this much to your local provincial coin that is being minted. So this is minted probably in the Western satrapies because it has a Greek Hellenic figure, and here is this Achaemenid guy, the local governor, sitting there. So probably about 15 of these or 20 of those maybe is worth to that. Don't quote me on this, but I'm just giving you an example in terms of measures and weight. So what you could do is you could trade easily. If you're sitting in India and you have spice and you want to, you know, and people in the Western satrapies want to know how much it is worth, they would know. As I mentioned, Darius is also going to go to this area. We know in 513 BC, the Achaemenids went towards the Danube and established 8 frontier forts on the Danube. Now, the Danube River is very nice, but I'm sure there was other reasons why they want to do this, where Thrace and Macedonia also get connected or plugged in into this system. Hence, this royal road really brings this Eurasian African trade together in the 6th century, where China, India, Persia, China is a stretch, is a bit further east, of course, is not part of this trade exactly, and the Mediterranean come together. Okay? So that is the Achaemenid contribution, and this royal road is very important because what is the road for trade that we always read in our history textbooks, and what is the name of that road? The Silk Road. It's not the royal road. But this road is there from the 6th century BC. So what happens when the Achaemenids leave? Does it disappear? Does nobody else travel on this road? Well, obviously they do. Now, the third of these Iranian empires is the Parthian Empire. And in the 1st century, this is a nice map off the internet, of course, it beautifully puts where the Parthians are. There are the middlemen. There are the people in the middle between the Roman Empire and the Chinese Empire that we hear about so much, the Han, which is quite amazing in itself, as well as the Kushan Empire, which we hear far less about, this Indic civilization that is so important, okay? Except I think Begram, sort of the base at Begram, is a location of one of these important Kushan and ancient, production centers. So these are some of the major empires in the 1st century of Common Era. And as you can see, there's this nice red road going here and there and there. And this we usually call the Silk Road. First the road on land, and certainly the sea is also important. It would be interesting for someone to look at the old royal road and see how much of that corresponds to this earlier or later Silk Road. The story of the Silk Road, as many of you may know, is that in the 2nd century BCE, Zhang Jian decides to go westward. And where he'll go is to the Parthian Empire. That's where the Chinese are going to go. They're going to get close, actually, to this area. They're going to get close to this area. That's where they go. And that is, in the 2nd century BC, Emperor Wu Di of China and the Parthian Emperor Mithridates II, who you see his coin on the other side, are going to come together. That is the Han and the Parthian dynasty. They say, trade sounds good. And of course, the Chinese have amazing commodities to trade. From the 1st century, let's say there are all sorts of things that you would want from China, and that's what the world wanted. The Chinese produced a lot, and then the Indians. So things needed to go westward. Now, the reason for this Sino-Iranian or Persian contacts are important Chinese historian Sima Qian tells us that the Anhi, that is the Parthians, or Parthia, is situated several thousand leagues west of the region of the Great Yezhui. The people are attested on the land, cultivating the fields and growing rice and wheat. They also make wine out of grapes. They have walled cities like the people of Dayun, or the Sogdians, another Iranian-speaking people. The region containing several hundred cities of various sizes. Some of them inhabitants are merchants who travel by carts or boats to neighboring countries. The coins of the country are made of silver and bear the face of the king right there. There's Mr. Mithridates. So the Chinese noticed that this is an important area, and so we should actually conduct some sort of a trade agreement. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, the nice story about the beginning of the Silk Road between the Chinese and the Iranians. Sima Qian, in describing some of these Iranian merchants, one group of them being called Sogdians, who lived in Sogdiana, he says, although the states from Sogdiana, west of Anhi, speak rather different languages, their customs are generally similar and their languages mutually intelligible, because they're all Iranian languages. The men all have deep-set eyes and profuse beards and whiskers, just like myself, although I've made it a little bit smaller, shorter. They are skillful at commerce and will haggle over, it should be, I missed it, over every last sort of cent. Let's use that. So they're very good hagglers over that. And so that is how our Silk Road trade is going to start up. The Chinese are going to have things, but the Parthians are going to have some things as well. They are going to take it westward, right? Because the Parthian is the empire next to the Romans. So beside wars, actually trade was going on as well. And certain things are going to go eastward. And some people in the middle also are going to make a lot of money if you're a trader in the between. The Parthians and the Kushans, that is. These two are going to make a lot of money. Here's a Kushan coin, which, by the way, is in the museum of, I think it's Hovishka I, if I'm not mistaken. And in India, there are places that gold was extracted, and so gold coins were minted by and large in India. Here is the figure of Ardaksho, the deity of fire in this Zoroastrian tradition. So this is part of this Indo-Iranian world, a tradition. And we're going to see how that plays out. But I wanted you to see that that's the type of coinage that the Kushans are producing along this trade route. Okay, that is their mint. The last of our empire, the Sassanians. So I've got a better map. It looks pretty, it has a lot of cities next to the Eastern Roman world, right? So this is the Eastern Mediterranean, and this is the Iranian world, which includes modern-day Iraq, Iran, parts of the Caucasus, what we call Central Asia, Afghanistan, and parts of Pakistan. Between 224 CE and 651 CE. These Sassanians are going to establish themselves as a powerful empire in the 3rd century, starting with the second king called Mr. Shapur. Mr. Shapur has this beautiful silver coinage, which is, I think, in the museum as well, where on the front it has his image, has a beard, a lot of curly hair, and he says, I am the Mazda, worshipping King Shapur, king of kings of the Iranians, whose race is connected to the gods. That is this entire legend being on it. So he says, I'm a Mazda worshipping. Mazda refers to this deity called Ahura Mazda. This is this important deity in the Zoroastrian religion that you may have in your textbook. Some were mentioned, and an important symbol of this religion is the fire altar, sometimes called the fire temple. And their priests are called the Magi, like the 3 wise Magi, who in Greek tradition are thought to be able to see the stars, can predict important future happenings, and hence the story of an important personage in history, of course, in the 1st century. What we get is this fire altar. So right away they say they are Zoroastrian, and this guy is the king of the Iranians. So that is what they're trying to portray. But also, they're going to open up some of the trade routes that they were not privy to, and these are mainly Armenia, Syria, and in Anatolia. And you're going to say, why? Well, those are the important routes to get your commodities westward. Here's Mr. Shahpur in a relief in southwestern Iran. He has to really fight for this, you might say. The Romans say, no, you can't really do this. So he says, okay, let's go and see who can. So this is, I think, this is Gordian, one of the Roman emperors who ends up dead in this battle. Then he ends up fighting Valerian, the other important, second important Roman general in the 3rd century, in the 250s, and he just gets caught. So they bring him back to Iran. And the third one, Philip, who's going to end up paying ransom. Once the Sassanians established their hold in this region, now Armenia, Syria, and Anatolia become important bases for trade. Already in the 6th century, if you have heard of the Emperor Justinian, in his novella, he says the Iranians or the Persians and the Romans can trade in 3 meeting places. One is in Armenia, in the city of Divin, important Armenian center, and the other one is in Syria and Anatolia. That's why sometimes people are fighting each other. They want access to roads and trade. Here's a modern, I would say, replica of that scene that you saw. That this is also in the museum that I'm very excited to see. I want to go see and photograph it, where you see Mr. Shahpur there, right? And there's Gordian. He's kind of taking a nap down there in this one. And actually here, I think this is probably Philip, whose dress has become like an angel flying. You see, so an interesting replica of this. And Mr. Shahpur made many of these. It's a big relief. So this is a modern appreciation of this momentous 250s time period that I was told perhaps it was done in India by the Parsi community, the Zoroastrians of India, which is quite interesting. So that is Shahpur and the beginning of the Sassanians. And so this Silk Road is going to thrive. Of course, there's going to be problems, but here's one map that shows approximately how trade is going. That is going through north of this Iranian world, and from China, of course, going to this Indic, to the Iranian, and to the Mediterranean. Later on, I think the sea route becomes much more important after the 5th century. What is being traded on this road, of course, beside, well, we hear about silk. Silk is very important, and there's a reason why the Chinese silk is important. It's not that the Chinese are only producing silk at this time. No, no, no. The Persians made silk. They learned it from the Chinese. But what the Chinese fed the silkworm, the mulberry, from the mulberry tree, and the way they grafted the silk was far superior than anything anybody else did. That's why Chinese silk was so much sought over all other silk. Now, the Romans really wanted it because they were paying a lot of price. Imagine a yard of Chinese silk, $99.99. It gets to these traders who are going to get on their camels, go through the Taklamakan desert. That's really harsh. With Bactrian camels, you need 2 hump camels to get over this one. You end up in this Eastern Iranian world, you're going to sell it probably $200 on $199.99. These Sogdians are going to bring it to the Iranian world for probably $299.99. And then it's going to, by the time it gets to the Romans, it's really high. The Romans tried so hard from the 4th and 3rd century to get access to the silk, bypass all of these middlemen, because it was so expensive. And the Persians were not letting them do this. The way the secret got out was that in the late 5th, early 6th century, Christian Syriac monks smuggled the technology in their cane, and then things changed somewhat. But of course, you still can't make very good Chinese silk, even on the Mediterranean. So still, Chinese silk was great, but you could buy, lower-end silk, locally produced. So certainly, silk is the famous one, but there are all sorts of other things that are being exchanged. Spice. Why spice is important? Well, it's important because I just had a cold for about 5 days, a head cold, and my nose was being blocked all the time. God, what am I going to do? instead of taking, you know, Alka-Seltzer Plus? Well, as I was a child, I always told salt reduces inflammation. All you got to do is just put some salt water in your nose, you're fixed. You're done through the day, you're good. If you have an infection, the best antibiotic, salt gets it. And that's just one, salt is more readily available. It has so much function. It's not just people like to put it on their, you know, food and get a good taste. That's why spice is so important. We should think of history of medicine beyond just the history of taste, actually. And the Indians, and in this area, that's where you get sort of the main center of production of spice. Not the only one, but main production. And so spices start heading this way. You make money on the same way, you engage in trade doing these things, okay? Now, I've talked barter economy. That's sometimes, it's done on a local level. We know that there was a monetary exchange. And so we're introduced to the beginnings of a new form of monetary exchange. As we always have it in our textbook, Eurasian consumption and trade. The Romans are wealthy, and you know, some of the wealthy ladies are at home, and they say, okay, I want this silk from China because I know what's going on in China if you read some Byzantine text. And so there it is an empire that is interested in luxury. How do you pay for it? Well, they usually pay for it with gold coin. Very nice. Where do they get the gold coin? Well, they have actually people in, and we can't see it here, up north, the Berbers are going to go with their camels down to Africa, right, where the major deposits of gold is. You exchange that, you get the gold, you bring it back, mint it, you give it back, you sell it that way. So gold is going this way, and money is going eastward. So who wants the silk? Well, everybody does. And why Chinese silk, I just told you. Money is moving this way. It's going to India, this Iranian world, and certainly China, because people in the West are interested in these commodities. But that is a general view of trade. Money going eastward, commodities going westward. I guess it's happening again? No? I think so. I guess we're in the same road, right? Unless you don't want an iPad. And that would be, you know, an issue. But these places also produced locally things that were important. So here's a nice map off the internet again. So let's see what's in this Iranian world. It doesn't have a picture, but it says what? Rugs, textiles, well, dates, yeah, maybe. That's not bad. So let's see what is being produced on this Iranian world, this area. These Persians produce something called a Persian rug, which, since even our Chinese sources in antiquity says that they were actually pretty good. And I think they're still pretty good. They still fetch a good price vis-a-vis other ones. So this rug making, and you might wonder why are rugs important at all? Well, right now it's beautiful, it's very nice, it's colorful, but it has a lot more functions. If you're sleeping on a dirt floor or a floor that is cold and so on, rugs are very important. And if you're wealthy, you'll pay for a very nice one. So we know rugs are, the Persians are producing rugs. They're producing silk rugs as well with their technology of silk. Along the Persian Gulf, we also know that the Romans are telling us pearls are being actually sold. So pearl and rugs are at least two of the things that are being sold to the east and the west, at least from this local Iranian world. So, as I said, these Persians, as our Simachian told us, really haggle over everything, and they're good businessmen, and it seems that they are. And these are part of this in-between world, the Armenians, the Persians, and the Sogdians, and the Chinese, and the Arabs, we should also mention, okay, who are dealing and taking money and making money. Here's a Sogdian tomb, two people meeting each other. I don't know if they're giving each other money or a gift. Well, let's see, how does that impact world history? What is it from this Iranian or the Persian world that maybe still survives with us beside the Persian carpet? Well, I don't know if you've been to any of these or places looking like this. This place is called a bazaar. And in fact, I was in Chinatown last night. I saw a Chinese bazaar. I said, oh, interesting. Well, the bazaar, or in its ancient form in Middle Persian, bazar, is a Persian term. that again points us back to this issue that this market was very important in the Iranian world. And so they established these bazaars where people came, bought, and traded and sold. And the terminology then went westward. So now we use bazaar, of course, in some ways as well. So that is one of these Persian terms that is used. And it very much has to do with economy. The other one, here is a nice 16th, 17th century image of a Persian, as it says, caravanserai. Well, in Middle Persian, caravan has the same terminology. It's a Persian term meaning actually a trading party, but then a caravanserai, Sarai means a place of stay for this trading sort of group. So you could imagine these Bactrian camels or horses or however you want. This is a caravan. And that's the Middle Persian, that's a Persian term that you get. So it's part of this trade again. And if you go throughout the Iranian and the Near Eastern world, you'll find these old, deserted places, not so nice anymore, that were these caravanserais on the major roads, old roads. People stayed there the night. They were given service, hospitality, right? Our pre-modern hotels, and they went westward and eastward. So these are at least two terms that you might now know that it comes from Iran, it's Persian, and has to do with this world trade. In terms of commodities, here's another, I think, amphora that you have here in your collection in the Asian Museum. And if you want to trade stuff, of course, you have to have things to put in, such as this one. So oil, wine, and spice on a more local level, perhaps, a little bit farther. How you do this is, let's say I have a business with you, and we have a partnership. And half of this oil jar is mine, half of it is yours, right? How do we make sure that we pay the taxes for it so it can go beyond the territory that is being produced? And who's going to take the record of this transaction? That is what you get. These are called Bulla. Well, this is a Bulla or Bulle. These are the imprints of my stamp and her stamp onto this piece of clay that's been baked and it's hard. And this is from the city of Susa. And it has, this one has 7 imprints. And what you do is you put this clay on top of that and you wrap it with a string. And that's what you get in the back of this bulla. And you got some nicer, actually, impressions right there. And then we see that this gentleman, so imagine this is me. My name is Farrokh Piruz. So that's my seal. That shows I have a stake in this oil jar. That's my property. You have chosen a smaller inscription called Abzun, increase wealth, and so on. So she has put her stamp in. And here's actually your official seal. Women in ancient Iranian world, in the Sassanian world, also had stamps. That tells us they engaged in business. That's one of the deductions you can make. She's an Iranian. Her name is Mehrbuzid. And she's Christian because she's got a cross right in front of her foot. So they give away their, from onomastics in terms of their cultural affiliation as well as religious affiliation. So here's this Miss Mehrbuzid, probably from the 5th, 6th century, living somewhere in Iran, and she has property. That's why she has stamps. Otherwise, you don't have stamp seals. Now, we put in our seals. Now it's ours, but we have to pay our taxes. So we got administrators. So you can see these guys are really big administrators because they've got big stamp seals. This guy, whose title is Judge and Protector of the Poor, I guess they take a part of it to pay the poor, is going to put his stamp seal saying, okay, we got our taxes, and then Shapur, priest of Iran, the Magi, this guy is going to put his seal, say they paid their taxes. Now our property can go and be sold to the next sort of empire next door. Probably they're going to tax them as well, but that's how trade in late antiquity took place. How did we pay our taxes? Either with that oil or these silver coins. In Iran, these are called drams, from Greek drachma. And this one is minted in the city of Ray in the year 625 of the King Khusro II, who ruled from 590 to 628. So we get all sorts of information. We know there's Zoroastrians, there's fire altar. And this is the most important coinage in late antiquity from China to the Roman world. It was decided that on the eastern side, The Iranians can mint their coins, and the Chinese accepted it, so it was just as good and accepted in China as it was in Iran and in between. And in the West, gold coins were very much accepted, and the Iranians and the Romans knew not to, to stick to their agreement. You mint gold, we mint silver, everybody else just uses them. So these are the two powerful monetary systems. The euro, and the Romans are producing the euro, we're producing the dollar, I guess. That's what's going on. Even when Islam comes in the 7th century, we should remember that, do you know which one is Muslim, which one is Sassanian? It's hard to tell. It's this one that is actually Muslim, because it has Bismillah in the name of God on the margins, but they've got the fire altar all the same. That is the money that they know and see as the actually the monetary form to be exchanged. And that is the power of economy in the Iranian world. Thank you.